Hello, hello. So, what do we have for you this week? It's been interesting in that most of my week was taken up playing Mass Effect Legendary Edition. In that I beat all three games pretty much 100%, except for some of the overly difficult things to do, like playing it on Insanity or something. From Friday when it came out, I played until was it Thursday morning, and I beat all three. Good Lord. I'm Mass Effected out for now, but I'm very happy I did play it. So that's basically been taking up most of my time. So as far as any game reviews, we're not going to have any in this show, in this episode of This Week in Geek. This week it's going to be three shorter movie reviews of discs that have come in over the last week or so. One being MacGruber had a re-release for the first time, I believe, from Mill Creek on Blu-ray and DVD. And we've also got Star Trek Lower Decks Season 1 on Blu-ray from Paramount. And we also have Fast Times at Ridgemont High from the Criterion Collection. They have a new 4K transferred version on Blu-ray. So that's coming up. But we also have three news stories brought to us from Birdman, and we have three weird news stories. There were a couple more, and I looked, and I went, I'm not going to do any ones as long as we did last week, because, my God, I think he sees the article sometimes, and then he doesn't realize that it's like a 15-minute read to read one article. That's not something you necessarily want to do when you're recording by yourself. You're going to bore people to death, especially if it's all scientific or alien conspiracy theory stuff. If that's the case, he can come on and talk about it when he feels up to it. So we're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to go into my review of, let's go with MacGruber first, and then we're going to come back with the geek news and what's been happening this week.
Basically, use the geeks.
Leave me alone, geek boy.
Holy shit, you geeks are badass.
I received a box of Mill Creek releases, and we're going to slowly go through them. The first one I want to talk about here, though, we'll be talking about more on either A Turd or Treasure or next week's show. But the first thing I received was the Blu-ray release of MacGruber. I believe it's had a release before. I think it might be out of print now. And they picked up the rights and they released it as a single disc Blu-ray release as well as a single disc DVD release. And we received both. I did check out the DVD as well, and it's pretty good quality. I mean, for a DVD, watching it on a 4K TV at 65 inches, you're going to notice that there's a limitation to what 480i can do, even with upscaling that I can get through my player. But it is a serviceable DVD release, so if you're looking to pick up, something to throw in the cottage or at your parents' place or as a backup, or if you still have a portable DVD player or something, you can pick it up. It has an MSRP of, I think, roughly $10 or so, but you're going to find it probably for $5 at Walmart or on Amazon or something. And if you're just looking to, complete a DVD collection, it's worth it. The Blu-ray, I would say at this point, with Blu-ray saturation, what it is with like 99% of people having access to it, it's probably the way to go. MacGruber is one of those films that was really, really underrated when it came out. Didn't do well initially. I saw it in theaters, was in stitches. I didn't think that the small little skit that they had made that was a running gag on SNL was, they tried to expand it to a movie. I'm like, how are they going to do that? It's just a rip on MacGyver. And it turns out that they did a pretty good job. It seems a little bit ahead of its time. The comedy is a little more in line with what we like now, 11 years on, than it was at the time. All the cameos from WWE wrestlers in there was funny because I wasn't watching at the time, so I had no idea who they were when I saw it in theaters. Seeing it now makes me laugh even more, just how they pieced it together. Will Forte is absolutely fantastic in this, hamming it up, cheesing it up. It is almost a bygone era now. It's harkening back to that era where you had these ridiculous, silly, over-the-top R-rated action movies. Think Pineapple Express, think Tropic Thunder, and you get the general idea here. Plus, it's always nice seeing Val Kilmer in a movie. Recently, he's had some health problems, so that obviously took him away from doing that. But this was one of the last ones I remember where he had a big prominent role. Hopefully, he can come back and do more. It is a bare bones Blu-ray release in that, you know, you get the movie, you get the Mill Creek intro, and that's it. But the good part there is they fill the entire disc, so you're getting maximum quality. I've seen, by comparison, streaming copies pop up online, or you see clips on YouTube where people had previous Blu-ray releases, and there's like mastering errors and stuff where you'll see like macro blocks and stuff pop up on the screen. And I even tried to find the exact same spots on this disc, and no issues here. So obviously this is a better transfer than what people had released previously. So I don't know. It doesn't say that it was minted from a new print, but it could have just been that there was a mastering error on the original discs from way back in the day. That being said, is it for everybody? Probably not. It is one of the best early 2010s era comedies, and I know that they're making a TV show sequel, I believe, to this now. So we'll probably want to keep an eye out for that. It is really worth it, especially if you can pick it up for like 10 or 15 bucks. One of the funniest films that you probably haven't seen.
The Prime Minister of Sweden visited Washington today, and my tiny little nipples went to France.
Gossip, rumors, panic in the streets. We're lucky.
This Week in Geek
News.
It's time for the Geek News. What do we have this week? Birdman gave us 3 stories here. The first one is from bleedingcool.com, and it says Warner Brothers reaches deal with Regal, and Dune isn't coming to HBO Max. It says here, ever since Warner Brothers and HBO Max announcements were made, it has been apparent that Legendary was a bit salty about the whole thing. There were rumors of a lawsuit almost right away, with the main point of contention being the release of Dune. Legendary was also already looking to sell Godzilla vs. Kong, but Dune was supposed to be its big release and a possible kickoff to a new franchise. How Dune is going to end up being released has been the topic of rumor for months now, and it seems that we're finally having an answer. We also see that Warner Brothers is starting to strike deals with theaters for the 2022 movie season after promising that the HBO Max rollouts for 2021 would not be the way forward. According to Deadline, Warner Brothers has already reached a deal with Regal Cinemas to restore 45-day theatrical windows in 2022 before titles go to streaming. However, they aren't making this deal in a vacuum. It seems that Dune is going to be the test case according to multiple sources. It will premiere in Venice in September ahead of an October theatrical run, with HBO Max availability coming to at a to-be-determined date after that. The new Warner Brothers merger has people scratching their heads about what it's going to mean for the future, and much like any of the other merger, it'll take time for the dust to settle so we can see how this all plays out. Legendary is absolutely walking away happy with a theatrical-only release for Dune later this year. If nothing else, it keeps Legendary from possibly dragging Warner Brothers to court right in the middle of a new merger. So, the gamble there is not every country is going to be ready to go back to theaters yet. And even in the States, you might have hesitancy. So, if it comes out and it only makes like $25 million in its opening weekend, then they screwed themselves. So, I'm almost thinking a theatrical only release before January is not a great idea. I would almost think, start fresh, not necessarily fiscal year the next year, but like start fresh after Christmas. And by that point, pretty much everybody in North America will have had their vaccinations, and we'll also see how well things are handled and how the variants and everything are working through the models and everything. I just don't know if October is going to be early. I know in Canada it's not. Movie theaters here aren't opening up until at least August. And do you think that people then are going to be okay to go right away? I'll be fine. I'll have my shot. But in Canada, most people aren't getting their second shots until September or October. So it's going to kill the Canadian market if that's the only way it's going to be available. And it's theatrical only. And then if other countries aren't on board, they could potentially tank their movie, not realize, and just out of, stubbornness. So that'll be one that we want to keep an eye on for sure. Our next story here is from gamesindustry.biz, and it says Google says Stadia is alive and well. It is, technically. I've got a press account, so I can log in and see, the games and everything. But Google Stadia has been grabbing headlines in 2021, but perhaps not quite in the way internet giant would like. First, the company closed its internal development studio. We talked about that. In doing so, Google lost key talent, former EA and Ubisoft producer Jade Raymond, who we also talked about has since received investment from PlayStation for a new venture, Haven Studio, which I'm guessing, if their property does well, will eventually become a brand new, brand new Canadian-based Sony studio. Because right now, all of their Western studios are either in Europe or the States. They don't have anything in the Canadian stronghold, which means that they're out a lot of talent, especially in the Montreal, either in Montreal or Vancouver, where a lot of game development is done in Canada. In fact, some of the biggest titles in the world are made up here, just not for Sony directly. So that would be a big get for them. All went quiet earlier this month when Stadia's head of product, John Justice, resigned, and 6 members of staff went to join Raymond at Haven. It sounds like Sony did a coup, and they found a way to poach the best talent that they had, that Google had. And I still want to see if that means they get the whatever intellectual properties that Google had got. It might just be a matter of time till Sony buys it up. Given the mixed reception at launch, previous complaints around the lack of updates to service, and even the fact that various witnesses in the ongoing Epic versus Apple trial can't seem to figure out whether Stadia is even still operating, it's all too easy to imagine the cloud gaming services days might be numbered. But developer marketing lead Nate Ahern tells Game Industry the Biz that the platform is alive and well. We're well on our way to over 100 new games launching on Stadia in 2021, and we're continuing to make Stadia a great place to play games on devices you already own. I'd tell any non-believers to take notice of how we're continuing to put our words into action as we grow the Stadia Makers program, partner with AAA studios like Capcom, EA, Square Enix, Ubisoft, and others. Most of those were already on the contracts before that. I don't think anything's new except for EA and Capcom are new. When pressed for more information, Ahern said Google was focused on delivering value for our partners and on behalf of the players. He pointed out the release of newer titles on the platform, such as last week's Resident Evil Village, the introduction of AAA hits like Resident Evil 7, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order on the Stadia Pro subscription, yada, yada, yada. And the article goes on and on, but yes, if they can make it to some of their contracts I think are for 3 years. If they can make it to through 2022, I could see them having enough of a library that they become viable and they'll keep it. So that's where we'll want to keep our eye on it, is how long are they going to last through this next year, next 12 months or so. And that's really it, because it's a long article just showing basically what games are on there and what isn't. And I honestly haven't used it since I've received some games for review, because there hasn't been anything exclusive. And, unless there's a PC game that isn't available on any other platform that is available either on Steam or Stadia, there's no reason for me to review a copy on Stadia anymore unless there's a killer app. The last one pretty much being that I got Cyberpunk, and it was the only version of Cyberpunk that really worked. So our final article for the news this week in the shorter news segment is from Kotaku. It says IGN staff criticizes management's decision to pull article supporting Palestinian aid groups. It says here today, and this was as of a few days ago actually, IGN editorial staff published an open letter decrying Sunday's removal of an IGN article and its associated tweet that linked charity supporting Palestinian victims of recent Israeli violence. The article and tweet posted on May 15th to violent military strikes against the people of Gaza by the Israeli Defense Force were taken down on May 16th without IGN editorial staff's permission or involvement. IGN didn't release a public statement about the removal until early the next morning, nearly 12 hours later. According to the eventual statement, the content was removed because it was not in line with our current intent of trying to show support for all people impacted by tragic events, and that by highlighting only one population, the post mistakenly left the impression that we were politically aligned with one side. Sources tell IGN editorial staff was enraged over both the removal of its article showing solidarity with the Palestinian people and the subsequent statement by IGN corporate. Today, they published an open letter on Medium signed by more than 60 IGN staff members. In the letter, IGN staff said they were appalled by management's decision to subvert the editorial autonomy and remove our post directing aid to Palestinian civilians currently suffering a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the West Bank, and Jerusalem. The letter called management's removal of the article clear instance of corporate overreach that demonstrated blatant disregard for the most basic standards of journalistic integrity and editorial independence. The open letter concludes by calling for all hands meeting at IGN/J2 Global Upper Management, full transparency about the sequence of events that led to the takedown, and a commitment from management to reinstate the removed article and formally recognize IGN's editorial dependence and autonomy. Kotaku has contacted IGN inquiring about the letter and the circumstances surrounding the takedowns. The message comes from after a difficult weekend for IGN editorial staff. Sources told Kotaku staff spent most of Sunday unaware exactly why the Palestinian charity post was removed, or if the company higher-ups were even going to make an official statement on the matter. Today, tensions remain high. IGN staffers have responded by taking matters in their own hands, linking followers to the thing, yada yada. Today, Waypoint reported on a contentious morning editorial meeting at IGN. Staff Vice President and COO Pierre Schneider apparently said little, arguing that the issue was the charity article choosing a side in an ongoing war. Schneider reportedly could not offer an answer as to when an employee inquired whether IGN's parent company J2 Global was motivated to perform the takedown by investments it has in Israel. Ooh, that would be interesting. IGN is the biggest gaming news site in the world, and so when it published an article directly supporting people of Palestine, it was seen as many observers as watershed moment in Western gaming media and Western media in general. Following IGN's article, a number of smaller outlets and creators shared similar. You know what? I understand from the cold, calculated message of we want to maintain neutrality completely, unless it's an aid thing for, like, if you want to post for the Red Cross or something that goes to anybody there, but if one side is particular, like if there's an ongoing conflict and you want to maintain, let's say, political neutrality, and you see that one side maybe has more people hurt, more civilians hurt, more kids hurt, something like that, where it's one, like, let's say there's a conflict goes on and one side has more than the other, and they're in much more desperate need of help. There's nothing wrong with what they did. They're posting that, and all they had to do, I didn't read the actual original article because it's not up, was, if they just said, hey, we don't support this. If you want to donate to this, here's a fund specifically that gets it to the people that need it. And their argument of you're siding with a person on a war. No, you're trying to give humanitarian aid to people that aren't getting it. And if the argument that you're saying is, oh, you're supporting a political regime, no, you're supporting the hospitals. So this is looking bad, and I'm willing to bet that there is money involved, significant money, and they don't want to. Now this is going to be shining a big light. Don't be surprised if IGN has all their staff fired, because they're not afraid to do that. And we all see how the gaming industry is working now with classic. I'm going to say classic or established agencies. So it's going to be an interesting little bit. There hasn't been an update since Monday, Tuesday. Probably going to hear more about this in the next week or so. So we'll make sure we keep on top of that. And that's going to do it for this week's Geek News. We're going to take a quick break and get to my review of, let's say, Fast Times at Ridgemont High from the Criterion Collection.
This is a fair request, and I promise I will not judge any person only as a teenager, and that this is no more right than saying all teenagers are drunken dope addicts or glue sniffers.
The Criterion Collection sent over their new release of Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It's a brand new, mastered from 4K transfer that I've seen the film. Obviously, it has the notorious background where it was notoriously hard to get a good working VHS copy from rental stores because at the scene where the dream sequence where one of the actresses takes her top off had been rewound over and over and over again to the point where the tapes wouldn't work anymore. And that was sort of one of the first instances of rental culture affecting a release, and ended up becoming almost more famous than the movie itself, as well as a few meme-worthy quotes from the film. Especially considering that a lot of teen movies and coming-of-age movies that had come out before this, like Porky's and Meatballs and others, they tended to be more on the blue side of just over-the-top crass humor, just like, oh, look, naked people. And that was apparently like the funniest thing. Whereas this had comedy and drama, and it sort of set the template for what the 80s teen coming-of-age movie was going to become. So I don't need to necessarily review the film. We know it's actually a classic, and it does hold up. There's a lot of comedies from this time period. Like, I'm not a fan of Animal House. I find that it wasn't funny. I've watched it as a kid. I didn't think it was funny. It's just, I don't get it. It wasn't my thing, yet it's being lauded as one of the greatest films of all time. Comedy films, that is. And this is usually held up in the same high regard. And it is one that actually does hold up, because a lot of the experiences are universal and they transcend the specific generation of when they came out. Quite obviously, it's supposed to be representative of late 70s teen culture in the States, and coming out in I think it was 81 or 82. The big deal behind it was that the director, Cameron Crowe, had actually gone undercover as pretending to be a teenager, hello fellow youth, hello fellow kids, hello fellow teens, and had just wanted to absorb it, had a young enough face that could pass that way, and wrote an entire article, editorial, and turned it into a screenplay and into Fast Times at Ridgemont High. There are some jokes in there that might not clash well today, but I kind of like that they're still in there, simply because it's supposed to be showing you the culture of the time, and that's what it was. So, you might be triggered by some things. It's fairly mild and tame compared to a lot of things that, would maybe go way over the top. But it is just a classic study of all the different, cliques and characters that existed, that went at least from the late 70s until when I was through high school, and or mid 2000s, and that was pretty universal. Some things changed with technology, but the whole idea of the groups of friends, the things you talk about, it still held up, at least then. Don't know what it's like now, but some of these things that you can pretty much find in any generation. So I want to talk quickly about the transfer, because I had seen it on VHS, I owned it on DVD, and this is the first time I've seen it in high definition, and especially since it's from a newly minted digital transfer. So Amy Heckerling directed it, who is the director of the film. I should say Cameron Crowe was the writer. Supervised it, went and tone mapped everything, tried to give it as close to the cinematic theatrical experience as possible. It's got a new 5.1 surround soundtrack that is at, I guess, lossless for the first time, so you're going to hear all the nice music in it. It's just going to mix very well. It had a pretty good mix for a film that at the time a lot of comedies were still like mono, even in theaters. So they've done a good job of not like overproducing it or over editing or changing too much or filtering things. It sounds pretty natural. There is a commentary on here from 1999 from the DVD release that's carried forward. It, as good as it is, I honestly think a lot of the insights that are on there are dated, obviously, and you can get more from watching, YouTube videos, people talking about it. But it is there, at least, that if you wanted to listen to the commentary from, 22 years ago or so. There is a television version of the film on there that I've never seen before. And it's obviously it has certain things that are edited or changed, certain swear words, and maybe nudity is cut. But there's also deleted and alternate scenes, because they used to do that. They would pad out movies to give it the right run length to get a 2-hour time slot or a 3-hour time slot, depending on when they were doing it. And there is new conversations with some of the principal cast and crew. There are just little bits and pieces that were on the previous releases that are included here, which is nice. There's subtitles, which I don't always mention that, but I know that some people really do need it, because I only think of subtitles when I'm watching a foreign film, but the reality is sometimes things can move too fast and you want to be able to see what's happening on the screen. Now, there is also an essay included, which is, they always include these little booklets with the Criterion releases. Interestingly enough, this is a Criterion release that has an MSRP of about $28 US. It's about $7-8 less than I'm used to seeing. Now, it's because there is a sale going on, but I have seen it on other sites, not just on the Criterion website itself, at about that $30 to $35 price point, which is about $5 cheaper than you usually see them, which is pretty good. It's a rewatchable movie. I would say not infinitely rewatchable, but you can watch it, once a year. You could watch it with your friends if they haven't seen it. It's worth watching. There are some very memorable moments. It's a well-produced release, and if you're looking to get the best quality copies of all of your favorite 70s and 80s comedy dramas, this is one you're going to want to put in your collection.
Go crazy?
Don't mind if I do!
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria!
It's time for the weird news, and Birdman grabbed us 3 here. This first one is from WKRN.com, and it said, what is this, Nashville? Looking at the website looks like it's Nashville. It says 111-year-old Australian recommends eating chicken brains for a long life. Okay. So this is from Australia, the Associated Press. Australia's oldest ever man has included eating chicken brains among his secrets to living more than 111 years. And there's a picture of him. He looks about 88, 89. Like, he looks like a 90-year-old, not like somebody who's 21 years older than that. Retired cattle rancher Dexter Kruger on Monday marked 124 days since he turned 111, a day older than World War I veteran Jack Lockett when he died in 2002. Kruger told Australian Broadcasting Corp in an interview at his nursing home in the rural Queensland state town of Roma days before the milestone that a weekly poultry delicacy has contributed to his longevity. Chicken brains. Chickens have a head, and in there's a brain, and they are delicious little things. He said, "Oh, that's amazing." They're just one little bite. Kruger's 74-year-old son, Greg, credits his father's simple outback lifestyle to his long life. Nursing home manager Melanie Calvert said Kruger, who is writing his autobiography, was probably one of the sharpest residents here. His memory is amazing for a 111-year-old, Calvert said. John Taylor, a founder of the Australian Book of Records, confirms that Kruger has become the oldest ever lived Australian man. The oldest ever verified Australian was Christina Cook, who died in 2002 at the age of 114 and a little over 100, nearly 150 days. It says here, that's it. That's actually the article. So that's kind of neat. What do you call that? There's octogenarian. What do you, when you hit 100? So wait. I just realized something. He just had his 111st birthday. Nice. So that, it's not weird. Well, maybe it's something in the brains. I mean, sure. The next story here is from the Anime News Network. Let me zoom in a little bit because that text is tiny. And it says here, life-saving technique to deliver oxygen carrying... Wow, there's a lot of hyphenates here. life-saving technique to deliver oxygen-carrying liquid through anus gets named after Evangelion. Oh boy, I'm getting the soundtrack on record vinyl in the next couple of weeks. It says here, a team of Tokyo medical and dental university researchers published a study on Friday showing that oxygen-carrying liquid delivered through the anus can be used as respiratory treatment on mice and pigs. The technique, which the study's author Takanori Takabe called the Ava method, refers to ventilation via anus. However, the name is also inspired by the LCL liquid depicted in the Evangelion anime, which the Ava pilots breathe inside of their mechs. The study was inspired by a breathing method commonly employed by loaches whose intestines are capable of absorbing oxygen. The method was proposed as an alternative to mechanical ventilators. The research added oxygen to a there's going to be a lot of medical words here. Perfluochemical, a compound with a high capacity to absorb gases and injected into the oxygen-deprived mammals. They found that the procedure boosted the blood oxygen of the subjects to a degree that Takabe described as astounding. The study was published in the journal Med. In addition, Takabe has launched a startup, Ava Therapeutics Inc., and is hoping to commence clinical trials as early as next year, although the method's safety on human subjects still needs to be evaluated. Takabe stressed the need to develop alternative means of treating respiratory problems, especially in the wake of ventilator shortages due to COVID-19. Shinji's voice actress Megumi Ogata commented on the study on Twitter saying, taking LCL through the anus, ... I've never thought of anything like that before. What's going on, Father? Masato-san. Will the Ava method save us from coronavirus? It's a bit different than what was expected, but still amazing. And all I can think is getting the damn robot. Oh my God. Okay, sure. But that also makes me think of South Park. The episode where Cartman tries to convince everybody that he can eat food with his butt and then poop out his mouth, and then he does it, and then it becomes the big rage everywhere, but then it gives you cancer or something. So, yes, of course. Oh my God. So, our final story here in our shorter weird news. This is from the South Bend Tribune. Fungus full of psychedelic drugs could cause Indiana brood X cicadas butt to fall off. What? And it's not a long article here, which is good. Thank you, Birdman, for not going way overboard with it. But we have here, it sounds like a twisted mix of Invasion of the Body Snatchers and a Grateful Dead show. But John Lill promises that it's all too real. This month, as billions of brood X cicadas emerge from dirt in Indiana and more than a dozen other states, for the first time in 17 years, some of the bugs will suffer a horrific science fiction-like fate. There's no delicate way to do this, but here's the gist all at once. A fungus laced with the same chemical as psychedelic mushrooms will invade their bodies and eat their way inside until their abdomens crack, falling off and get replaced by a ball of white spores. Because they're either bombed on psilocybin, or under the control of the fungus in some other way, cicadas won't even notice. With missing butts and full hearts, they will forge ahead until their only reason for existing, finding a mate and reproducing. Of course, the last part will be impossible with half their body rotted away. Really what they're doing is spreading these spores all over the place, said Lil, a cicada expert and the chair of biology at George Washington University. It's a sexually transmitted fungus. Ugh. Gross. You got the VD. They engage in normal courtship behavior, yet their abdomen is a big fungal mass. Oh, God. It sounds like something out of The Last of Us. The attempted copulation results in spreading the fungus even more, called Massapora cicadina. The fungus can be infected both male and females, but it affects the former in a special way. Usually males croon loud songs to attract a mate. That's the UFO-esque buzzing you'll hear in the spring. If a female catches a song she likes, she responds by flicking her wings. The Mesopora lays all that to waste. It causes the males to both sing and flick their wings, allowing them to attract any partner they can. That larger playing field helps the spores spread farther and wider. It's this gender-bending death zombie fungus, Lil said. That sounds like a cool punk band. It says here, all this obviously raises questions. Where did the fungus come from? How did we find out it's pumped with mind-altering drugs? And if you gobble a bunch of them, these buttless insects, can you get high? Scientists have known about Mesopora since the 19th century, Lil said, and somehow evolved to specifically attack periodical cicadas. It lays dormant in the soil for 13 or 17 years, depending on its preferred brood, and germinates as soon as cicadas start roasting. The magic mushroom connection, though, is more recent. According to a 2018 article by The Atlantic's Ed Young, researchers at West Virginia University were studying a gaggle of infected cicadas in 2016 when they discovered some of them were chock full of psilocybin garnered from the fungus. Others were loaded with amphetamines, too. At first, I thought, there's absolutely no way. Researcher Greg Boyce said at the time, it seemed impossible. Matt Casson, a professor and lead researcher on the project, wrote the academic paper with his team. They started calling their spore secreting bugs flying salt shakers of death. And there were enough psilocybin in the cicadas that Casson briefly worried he could get in trouble for studying a Schedule I drug without getting a permit from the Drug Enforcement Agency. I thought, oh crap, the DA is going to come here, tase me, and confiscate my flying salt shakers, he told The Atlantic. But there's enough hallucinogens in the things to get a human high? ? Despite how objectionable it may sound to some, eating cicadas is definitely a thing. Lil said high-end restaurants in Washington, D.C. incorporate the insects into their menus as a seasonal treat. One of his colleagues even refers to them as tree shrimp. Charming. Kassan guessed devouring a large number of infected bugs could have some kind of mind-altering effect, but keep in mind, people bold enough to snack on cicadas usually do so right after the bugs molt their exoskeletons, long before Mesopora takes control of their bodies. Older cicadas would be crunchy and unpleasant. Lil said even squirrels, rats, and birds who treat emergencies like ecological golden corrals avoid fungus-riddled bugs. I would not advise it. It says here, Mesopora cicada is just one of several bizarre parasites that the body snatch insects. There's a little bit more of this, but I'm going to skip that because it's just talking about similar ones. There's that one parasitic worm that goes into like tarantulas' heads and turns them into a zombie, and when they die, like when you spray them with like bug spray, then the worm comes out and it can be like 6 or 7 feet long. It's crazy. So yeah, thanks Birdman for this. I do like, was it salt shaker? That's creepy. Hopefully we don't have like a body snatcher type situation like that happen to humans. Although there is that case out, what is it? Is it Cape Breton, Northeast, the Maritimes, where they're investigating, or is it Nova Scotia or New Brunswick? They're investigating right now because there's this weird neurological disease that's popping up, and it's only amongst people there, and they don't know why. And it's like making them have neurological disorders where they repeat words and stuff. It's weird, and there's a study going on. They're trying to get funding to really investigate it because they don't know if it's environmental or if it's like a fungal thing or if it's something else. So who knows? Creepy. And that's going to do it for the weird news. Going to take a break here and get into the final review of the week, and that is going to be Star Trek The Lower Decks Season 1 on Blu-ray from Paramount. And once that's done, we're going to come back just to close out the show. All right. Next week, I just want to say we'll probably have 3 or 4 stories. If we can get shorter ones, we'll put them in there. Maybe Birdman will send longer ones. We'll see what happens. But that's going to do it. So let's check out my review of Star Trek.
Do you have any hobbies?
I collect spores, molds, and fungus.
Hold that thought. It's crapper time.
Paramount Home Entertainment sent over the new release of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 1 on Blu-ray. Now, if you had been following before this Christmas time, we were going through on Future Imperfect a lot of episode by episodes when we were having the last few seasons of Star Trek Discovery, Picard, and Lower Decks, and we've had mixed responses to leaning to negative on some of the releases. Not so much on the actual discs or anything, but on some of the content we don't always agree on, as a lot of people in the fandom, are coming to grips with how things are different now. One thing we did agree on, though, and I initially came into watching Lower Decks thinking that I didn't care for it. It turns out I didn't care for just sort of one character, but I thought, this is sort of that, but I don't care for it. Yeah. And then as the show went on, I went, hey, this is getting better and better, and it became probably the best Star Trek show that's currently airing in production. We've yet to see some of the other projects come out, but especially that season finale, I went, hey, they really got into stride. This is where they need to be for it to feel like Star Trek. And of course, it's going to be amplified being that it's animation and cartoon. And I obviously have been watching it online through streaming, and in Canada, that was sort of limited to 720p or 1080p, but like low bitrate streams and stereo. So here on Blu-ray for the first time, it is spread over 2 discs. Pulling it out right out of the case right now. There's a slipcover that comes on it. There is a little note on the front saying that it's from the executive producer of Rick and Morty, and that there's 2 hours of exclusive, never before seen stuff. There's a little insert that comes in there that just is an advertisement for Paramount Plus, which I don't think is actually available in Canada yet for our Canadian listeners. But the discs, they have the same blue covers that all of Star Trek releases have had, but behind them on the back artwork, you have episode descriptions and some custom art, which is pretty neat. And both discs, they have the special features spread out over top of them, which is neat too, because sometimes they'll backload that on a final disc, and that sometimes lowers the quality of the episodes. Luckily, the animation style lends really well to compression, and I did notice that there was obviously less banding and other compression artifacts that you would notice when you're streaming an episode versus on the higher bitrate Blu-ray. This is something that if they wanted to, they could put it on 4K and it would scale really well, because the AI upscaling on my TV and player did a really good job of taking the 1080p signal and upconverting it, because obviously it's a more clean art style. It's not like your traditional like anime or something where there's like a million little shading manual shaders. This is cleaner in the more modern animation style that you've come to see on most like Adult Swim shows or like the Fox Sunday night afternoon sort of stuff. But this also includes a really high quality 5.1 surround lossless track, and that is where it shines, because one of the things we talked about when we were discussing the show was the best thing off the bat. Well, some of the episodes were a little hit or miss, but the best thing off the bat was that the audio, the music, the score, the mixing was really well done on the cartoon, even in streaming form. So hearing it in proper uncompressed 5.1 surround and then popping my headphones in to hear it in stereo uncompressed is really a treat. It's very well put together. As far as the special features are concerned, there's a little bit of behind the scenes. There's a trailer, and then there's a full-length animatic. What's most interesting is there's deleted animatic scenes. So scenes that were cut, some I feel could have been animated and would have worked. Some I could see why they cut for time or maybe the flow of the episode. But I always like when they include stuff like that, because it's so rare that anything from Star Trek gets cut. The biggest surprise in recent years was when the Blu-ray sets were coming out and you got the extended cut of Measure of a Man on season 2 of TNG. So that was, I think, the first time I had ever been able to see that, because every time I had watched it was in syndication or on DVD where they didn't include it. So is this going to ultimately convert new people? I think that might have been the goal of them, an homage to fans, but here's get new people. I don't know how many new people they're going to convert. They might get some kids, but it is steeped enough in the lore that it makes sense that they're going after fans. but it is a good entry point for somebody who maybe hasn't watched Picard or Discovery, and they want to sort of get back into Trek, or maybe they want to introduce their kids or friends into it. It could be a fun way to get in, and it does have a little bit of that Rick and Morty feel, even if it's not as vulgar or over the top. It is in the States unrated, but in Canada all videos get a rating, so it's rated PG, and that's about fair. There's enough in there that I wouldn't give it a G rating, but there shouldn't be anything in here that is too objectionable to your kids. You should be able to watch it without having to cover their eyes or tell them to leave the room or anything. So, and there's a few really good episodes in here that I could see watching over and over again. So keep an eye out on store shelves for it.
Those magnificent bastards. Color me kooky, but something very odd is going on around here.
You're not allowed to talk anymore.
And that's going to do it for the show this week. What do we have coming up next week? Well, I've got a few more releases from Mill Creek. John Wayne movie called Hellfighters on Blu-ray and DVD. There's another Ultraman release. There's a 4-pack that I'm going to try to get through of war movies I've never seen before, Vietnam movies specifically. The set's called Scars of War. It's a 2-disc set with 2 movies on each, so 1 layer for each movie. Casualties of War I've heard of but haven't seen. Alamo Bay, Birdie, and Summer Tree. Heard of some of them, haven't seen any of them, so it's worth checking that out. I've also got a new headset from Soundcore to check out the Life, I think it's 35. That just came in today, so I'm going to make sure that I take some time to check it out. Also got a couple games on the go that I can't talk about yet, but that I did receive for review, so good titles, interesting upcoming ones that you want to hear about, so I'll make sure that I keep everybody informed about that. And that's sort of what's on my end right now. I don't know if Birdman has anything on the go just yet, but he will be providing news. Maybe I'll see if I can get him to give us an update on what's going on with him. And just be nice to hear his voice again. But that's going to do it for the show this week. It is a little shorter than normal, but it's because we just want to get through this and make sure that we keep you all informed. And my whole week was blasted away with playing Mass Effect. That's a lot of gaming in there for your $80 or $90 if it's Canadian. Well worth it. So that's going to do it for this week. I'll talk to everybody later.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.